Well, first of all, thank you all so much for doing this. And I understand that Ronnie Sue, you and your husband, and Norma were in the courtroom today. What was that like?
Well, for me, it was anticipation of what the outcome was going to be. I thought when I walked in that I asked my husband to hold my hand, and I didn't know how I'd feel. And I really didn't feel too much walking in. Sitting there, listening to Madoff talking, didn't mean anything. The man doesn't tell the truth, and he admitted he didn't tell the truth. He said that in May of 2006, he was under oath and he lied. And from that point on, anything he said was meaningless to me.
What was the atmosphere like for you, Norma?
Well, I personally felt that I needed to go there because I hadn't seen him in 21 years, and I needed just to see him, and I needed to have the judge not permit him to go back to his apartment, because to me that would have been the ultimate insult to every one of us that have invested with his company. I needed to see him go to jail.
You actually testified.
I did.
What did you say, and why was that important for you?
It was important to me because I feel that we are very small people to the system. And I feel that for the last 3 months, I've learned so much, and I learned that the SEC failed us. And I've seen over the course of the 3 months while we fight for restitution that SIPC is failing us and the IRS is failing us. And I needed to make sure in my mind that the legal system wasn't going to fail. And I needed to ask the judge, before he took the plea of guilty, to make sure that he learned 2 things. And one was, where is our money? And number 2 is, who else worked with Mr. Madoff in this?
Did you get answers to those questions?
Well, I was told by the prosecutors that that is their job and they will find that. And the judge concurred with that. And if that is the case, then I do feel that maybe there's hope. There's hope that the system that's in place will work. I haven't seen it in the last 3 months.
Let me ask you all a question as a group. How many of you believe Bernard Madoff acted alone?
None of us.
None of us. No.
Too comprehensive.
Right.
Too much paperwork that came every quarter, I think it was. Lots of paperwork. He couldn't generate all that himself.
How many people do you think were involved?
There had to have been dozens. Maybe some intentionally knew, some maybe were duped, but dozens. Because think about thousands of transfers of funds out of bank accounts into accounts, and thousands of statements every week of the year. We were shocked.
And I had read somewhere that for months at a time he would be out of the office, and that his sons would maintain the business. And how could they maintain the business had they not known that this was going on? Yeah. I think it goes well beyond the Madoff business as well.
Right.
I question the SEC and their complicity in this.
Because they didn't act, they didn't come down on him?
I think they were grossly negligent, and I think that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. That indicates that they didn't know. I think that there was some working together in some regard. That's my feeling.
What about his wife?
Oh, she knew.
Well, I feel, and I don't believe this, but let's say she didn't know. At this point, she has the opportunity to do what's right. And she's still asking for money that's obviously not hers.
She was the bookkeeper. She was the bookkeeper of the business.
And the wife of the man that did this. You share with you. You don't live a lifestyle like that and not understand where the money came from.
What would you say is the overwhelming emotion all of you are feeling today? And I'd like to go from left to right, from the first row and then the second row. What are you feeling today, Norma?
A little hopeful.
What about you?
And that was my word. Only in the last 2 minutes of the hearing this morning, a little bit hopeful.
Well, I do have to say, still anger and frustration that we haven't moved further, faster.
What about you, Sheryle?
There are really too many words, too many emotions, too many feelings. I guess right now it was very anticlimactic in a way, and really I think most of us, this is really just the beginning for us. This isn't the end of anything. This is the beginning of the rest of our lives right now.
What about you?
Frustration more than anything else. Frustration that the focus is so much on Bernard Madoff, the man, and not on how we're going to make whole or help the lives of the Americans that have been victimized by this horrible scheme.
How about you, Linda?
I'm angry, not only at Madoff, but the SEC as well.
I'd say frustration. There's a lot of things, we hope to do for our family, and they may not get done. So, and I think that's a big thing for me.
How about you?
I feel very disappointed. Like my husband just said, there were things that we had planned to do, waited to do, and a lot of anger towards what has happened to so many people.
In regards to his incarceration, cold comfort. I think that it doesn't satisfy what needs to be done. We need our government now to step in, as it hasn't in the past, and help the victims of this scandal. I just think that they owe us some assistance.
Let me go. I'm just going to do a couple personal questions about your individual stories. And Norma, I'd like to start with you. You invested a lot of money after your husband died.
No, actually, my husband invested 2 weeks before he died. 2 weeks after he died, I was taken by a family relative to meet Mr. Madoff, at which point he put his arm around my shoulder and he assured me that everything was going to be just fine and that I would be able to help educate my children and that my life was going to go on despite the fact that I had lost my husband.
You have lost a lot of money, and I understand you have a son who is disabled.
I do.
And I'm sure that's very demanding financially.
Actually, it isn't demanding financially. However, money was going to be put into a trust for him when I'm no longer here to take care.
Ronnie Sue, tell me, actually, I want to go to Linda now. You work for an orthopedic group in Fairfield, Connecticut, and contributed to your pension fund for over 20 years.
Correct.
And you had no idea this money was even going to Bernard Madoff, did you?
No. No. We really, the doctors, we had financial advisors, their advisors, and the doctors were the ones that really took care of everything for us. And I never had any reason to doubt or question them. I trust them implicitly. And I knew that they had my best interests at heart as well, because they were investing as well. So I never bothered to question it. And I was satisfied with the results. The results probably could have been better, could have been bigger, but we weren't greedy. We just wanted to get something back for our money, a return for our money. And if you're going to make more of a profit, then I feel you also have the chance of a loss as well. But we just seemed to be slow and steady, and I, for one, was just satisfied with that. I wasn't out to make billions. I just wanted something so that I could retire on.
Now is retiring a pipe dream for you?
I have nothing. I have nothing left now. I made a lot of financial decisions over the course of the years based on what I thought I was going to have in my 401k. I'm not that, savvy about investments and everything. I know that when you make an investment, there's always a chance that you're going to have a loss. You buy a lottery ticket, and you don't win. You've lost. Having said that, I knew that there was a chance. I knew what I thought I had in there today But I also knew that at the time I was ready to retire, there may have been some losses due to the market, not this. I knew and I was prepared to lose some of my money, but never was I ever prepared to lose everything.
So will you ever be able to retire now, Linda?
Maybe at 90. No, I mean, I'm going to, you know, now I'm praying that I have good health, that I can continue to work. That's what I'm asking for now.
What about you, Ron? You're a financial planner, which of course comes with its own baggage being involved in this situation. Mm-hmm. Some people might think, how could you get involved in this thing?
Yeah, and a very conservative financial planner at that, and someone that did a fair amount of due diligence on this project way back. But this is something that my wife's family had been involved in for many, many years. And I had an opportunity to review these statements. And I've had an opportunity to speak to NASD and SEC over the years to find out, had he been audited? And the reality is that the basic concepts that NASD and SEC undertake, finding out if your company is front-running, finding out if you're running a Ponzi scheme, finding out if you're trading on inside information, those are the most rudimentary things that an investigative arm will take care of. And once there was a sense or a knowledge that this was actually happening, I had some degree of comfort that this was really okay. And for all the folks in the family that had invested enormous amounts of money and life savings that are so wiped out from this, I feel absolutely terrible, and certainly this has impacted my quality of life significantly as well.
Did you, as a financial planner, did you recommend other people invest with Bernard Madoff?
I had one friend that I had recommended to Bernard Madoff. Beyond that, no. It's just the fact that I myself did not insist on moving funds out is somewhat embarrassing. That I stand here or sit here today as an investment advisor and someone who is fairly successful in doing what I do. It really just shows the magnitude of the quality of the crime that was committed here and the duplicity, the unintended duplicity, no doubt, by the government to help enable this to happen.
Robin and Lewis, you're teachers, retired teachers from Ohio, and I understand you watch these statements like a hawk every month. You review them, especially you, Lewis, as a math teacher. You looked at them carefully. Are you surprised that these bogus statements were so convincing?
Well, I am. I looked into certain things that he had done in the past, and you know, I guess I was impressed with his use of computers to do create statements and do transactions, and using the 24-hour market, you know, as far as using, you know, other markets besides the New York Stock Exchange. You know, he was the president of NASDAQ, and you know, he seemed to be on the cutting edge of a lot of things, and I know other brokerages were using him to do transactions.
You thought he was the best.
Right, and you know, he seemed to have, he had, you know, on paper, he seemed to have good ideas. I mean, I think if he was a legitimate brokerage, he probably would have done, you know, pretty good in the long run. But you know, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't, you know, I can't look into his mind and say, you know, when did things, you know, snap or something like that. But you know, I think he had some ideas, and you know, that's why I was, you know, confident that, you know, this was a good investment. And you know, certainly they turned in. I mean, this is, you know, some of the paperwork we got, and it's not even half of it. I mean, you know, every time they did a transaction, you get a statement, you know, and we used to get envelopes full with papers and things like that.
And can you believe these statements were all filled with bogus information?
Well, I think, you know, when you talk about does he have accomplices, There's a lot of computer work going into the creation of these statements, and I don't think I don't think that's his specialty. As far as being a computer person. I mean, I think he recognized it, and he probably went out and hired some really savvy people. But to tell him that to say we want you to show a certain gain in the investments, I mean, he would have had to give him, instructions so that this could be carried out. I mean, it can't be, it can't just, press a button and say, this is what we want.
You two are retired high school teachers. Mm-hmm. He did not scam only super wealthy people, did he?
No, and in fact, we've had a long-term investment with Madoff, and I'm not as savvy with money as my husband is, and when I would tell people I have a pretty good investment, and I never even mentioned who it was because I didn't think anybody would have ever heard of it, because that's not something that I was, knowledgeable about. And I've been retired for about 6 years now, and part of what enabled me to retire was the savings that we had built up over the past, how many years would you say, 26, 27 years?
27 years.
And it was all on paper. We just put our oldest daughter through college, and I wish we had used more from the Madoff account because, we live frugally. We don't live beyond our means. I don't feel like right now we have nothing. My heart goes out to people who've lost everything. Because
you all still have your pensions and some savings. But life is going to be much more challenging now.
It will. It will. And my husband, he's only a new retiree. He only retired. This is his first year in retirement. And after we looked at each other and realized what happened and were thankful we had our health and knew that, things were going to be different, I mean, he even said, if I have to go back to work, I will. And
do you think you might both have to go back to work?
It's
an option that I'm certainly leaving open.
Yeah.
Currently, I decided not to. It's probably not the best time, with the economy being the way it is, it's probably not the best time to start looking for work. But I guess if, like I said, my wife said, if I have to, I'll go back to work.
I wanted to add that I've been doing a lot of things in my free time, including volunteering with PTA, the things that I couldn't do when I was working. But I think one of the reasons it would not be easy for me to go back to work is that I work with a nonprofit totally as a volunteer. And I feel that has, it takes much of my time. At the same time, I can't afford to give the money that I would like to give to this particular group. So I give my time. And I think that that's worth something.
Diane, I know you and your husband, is it a magazine series or a book? What would you call it?
It's a magazine.
Okay.
It is called Art Now Gallery Guide, and it's considered by many to be the Bible of the art world.
So you and your husband publish a guide to galleries around the country.
Gallery and museum exhibition listings around the country.
And you've done pretty well, right? You made about $3.2 million doing this.
We did very well. He started it in the early 70s. And, after doing it for 35 years, at the age of 61, he decided to sell his business.
Okay. So you invested over $3 million with Bernard Madoff.
The initial investment was less than that.
But all told?
All told, with the subsequent sale of 2 houses, including his father's home after he passed away, the total was approximately $3.2 million.
It's gone.
It's gone, yeah.
And this has taken a real I understand this has taken a real toll on your husband.
My husband is suffering from severe depression now. He just can't get over it. He is really not functioning well. That's why he's not here. And I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they see what's happening with their father, and it's just heart-wrenching to me. My son is 13, he looked up to his father. He He needed his father. My daughter adores her father, but he's just not the same person. I hope eventually he'll get over it, but it's just a real struggle right now.
Meanwhile, Sheryle, you knew Bernard Madoff personally, Sheryle, for more than 20 years.
Yes.
Is this whole thing completely out of character, a complete shock to you?
Yes, it is, because otherwise, if it wasn't, I wouldn't have left my money with him. Yes.
How did he lure people into feeling that he was going to, as he told Norma, take care of everything?
Well, I think he initially, Bernie didn't really ask for money. His thing was to be asked. There was a whole aura. Now, I was introduced to him through an organization I work for, and a donor was giving a large contribution to this organization, and the stipulation was that Bernie managed the money, and that's how I met him. And people were just very grateful to be able to place their money with him.
So it was considered a privilege to be able to invest your money with Bernard Madoff?
I guess for some people, yes, it was considered a privilege, or yes, because he had a reputation of doing a fine job.
And he was selective.
Yes, he was selective. I was not in a situation where I would have been aware of that. The organization, he took their money very gladly, and after a number of years, and understand that the finance advisory of this organization had fully vetted him. And the finance advisory were people very high up in the financial world. These were not little individual investors.
But were you an individual investor?
I became an individual investor.
So let's focus on that. Go ahead.
I became an individual investor after two things happened. After the finance advisory reviewed who he was, and after the article at the end of 1992 was published stating that he was fine and dandy. There was a potential Ponzi scheme in Florida in '92, and there were published reports at that time that said, Bernie Madoff, it's fine. Everything is just fine and dandy from the SEC's point of view.
You're a CPA.
Yeah.
You invested your personal money with Bernard Madoff.
Yes.
Knew him personally for 20 years.
Yes. Obviously not very well, but then, I'm not alone in that.
Do you feel embarrassed because you are a CPA that you weren't able to sort of smell that something wasn't right here?
Truthfully, if anybody says that they could have, or first of all, if they could have, they should have said something. But there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on here. There's a lot, you should have said this, you should have saw that. Well, no, I'm not embarrassed how I feel. I feel that somebody stole my money. I didn't lose my money. It was stolen from me.
And you're still angry?
When somebody steals from you, yes, you remain angry. So, no, I'm not embarrassed. I received, and I'm like anybody else out there, and that's what people have to understand. I am all of you. When you get your statements from a broker, now he's a valid broker. These were broker statements. Does anybody out there, does anybody out there say, oh, gee, I wonder if the stock is really there? I don't think until now that was a question in your mind. Now everybody's, well, but I really don't think that was a question in most people's minds. He was the chairman of NASDAQ. There was no, to me, there were no red flags. There really weren't. And the return, people talk about this as the greedy bunch of people. For many, many, many years, we were underperforming the market. And the reason my husband had said to me, why are we here? Look, this one's getting 40%. It was during the tech years. And I said, well, it's consistent. It's there. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to think about it. And, that was the mindset, not greed, never greed. I didn't live a greedy life.
What about you, Ken? You're the mayor of Fairfield, Connecticut, and the town of Fairfield lost a tremendous amount of money in pensions for people like firefighters and police officers.
That's right. Residents like Linda, for every millionaire celebrity, there are hundreds and hundreds of middle-class Americans that got wiped by this fraud. We have our police officers, our firefighters, our school custodians, and in effect, 10% of their pensions, 2 to 3 years of their livelihood for pensioners that are middle-class Americans has been stolen. And that's why we're seeking recourse from our advisors, from the managers that introduced our town to these people. And there certainly had to have been a lot of people involved.
Do you have any recourse?
Yes, Katie, we do. We have the beginning of this story starts with the SEC failure. A government agency, Sheryle talked about the red flags that we didn't know about. The SEC knew about those red flags and did not act upon them since 1992 that we know of. It may have been earlier. The recourse we have now, there's a Security Investors Protection Corporation that's in place, was created to help defrauded investors. That's us. There's a $500,000 limit. To date, 3 months and 1 day after Madoff turned himself in, 12 checks have gone out to the people who are dying to get their financial restitution. We have the IRS, who has been they are the biggest beneficiary of Mr. Madoff's fraud. They have been taking illegally gotten money through the 1099s that we all paid with for however many years Madoff has been doing this fraud. The problem that we have right now is SIPC, the Insurance Protection Corporation, is paying back, when they do pay back these claims, based on the net equity, which means the original investment that people put in, minus any money that they've taken out. The IRS, however, has been collecting taxes every year on the appreciated value. And SIPC is not recognizing that appreciated value, yet we've paid taxes on it. And all of this inequity is because the SEC did not stop it and nip it in the bud.
And not to mention that the SIPC fund was established in the 1970s, according to 1970s funds. And those figures, that figure of $500,000, in today's dollar would be close to $2 million.
Just to say...
if you can explain this really simply.
Very simply. The answer to your question is Congress and the President. Because what needs to happen is changes to both the Internal Revenue Code, to the ERISA Code, and the Securities Investment Protection Act. We have 3 basic codes right now that are making things extremely murky, unpredictable, and very problematic, and may actually further punish investors who may have taken out more money than they've put in. People, middle-class Americans that are struggling to pay their bills, that have been paying taxes all these years, are now in danger of having those funds actually taken back, what little they have left. It's going to take acts of Congress and the government in general to make changes to these laws so that we can make them suitable for those of us that have suffered.
Are you up? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
As far as orthopedic specialty group, SIPC wants to treat us as a single investor.
Right, we did a whole piece on that.
140 of us, and they want to treat us as a single investor.
So the insurance company, or the insurance allotment that you would get would be for how many employees?
140.
And 1,100 in our case. And there's a hope of legislative change to allow each pensioner, because pensions are really a sacred trust, to allow each pensioner to be able to get some of the money back for their pension account.
We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. What now? $63 billion.
He didn't spend $63 billion. I mean, one of the things I think we all feel is there's a lot of money out there that somebody profited from, because nobody can spend $60 billion on material things. So a lot of people have that money, or it's being hidden, and we sure hope it gets recovered.
And you hope that you'll get a piece of that.
We absolutely believe that every victim should.
But we need action.
May I add one more thing? If the government does not step in, how can anybody feel comfortable and secure in investing in the American financial institutions again? I mean, if the government doesn't step in and correct this, how can anybody ever feel comfortable again?
And I think I can speak for most of us. We have tried to get to the government to listen to us.
Yes.
And they're not. We've tried to contact Congress. We have tried to contact senators. They are not listening. So I think, and I think Ron also was trying, I don't mean to speak for you, I believe the person who needs to help us is President Obama. And I do hope that he's listening and that he would be willing to speak to a select group of victims on behalf of all victims so he can understand the situation.
It was very hard to get people to speak to us. A lot of people are embarrassed. They don't want to talk about this. Why did you all want to talk about this on national television?
I think we need to get the story out. I think we've all said different things about the public needs to know we are not all rich, famous actors. That's number one. I think that the public needs to be aware that they are not protected by the SEC. And that's very important. I don't want this to happen to anybody else. And I think the public needs to know that when it says SIPC on your statements, or perhaps, and I hope this isn't the case, when it says FDIC on your bank account, that maybe we've never put either one to test. And that SIPC is not coming to that.
They're changing.
And it's to protect a lot of people as well as to get restitution for us.
Right. I think the only way we will get restitution is by making everybody aware of our situation, because as Ronnie Sue said, the government is not addressing this. I have also faxed and emailed and called, and we barely get responses.
In a bank robbery, the bank gets the insurance proceeds to replace the lost money. All these thousands of victims deserve to have, no one's looking to profit, deserve to have some of their money returned, whether it's through government action or through insurance action. It's not a bailout for corporations, it's a bailout for average Americans.
I think we need to restore our image with the rest of the world, too. Because I think at this point, people are looking at us, or looking at the government officials and saying, is this possible that this can happen? And I think we need to restore it, because we have wiped out an entire generation of investors because of what has happened.
Well, I think it's so important for people to come forward. I think it's one of those united we stand, divided we fall kinds of situations. The victims have to come together. We have to form alliances. We have to form groups. Ronnie Sue's group, Madoff Victims, Madoff Survivors, my organization, Madoff Help. All these are conduits for people to get involved. We can't stand back and be passive victims. We have to stand up and move, and together we can make some positive change happen.